All right, we're back with the third and hopefully final subsection of Section 5 of Cybercrime. And we're going to talk a little bit about how modern hackers work in the 21st century. And as I said in the last subsection, social engineering is kind of the art of being a con man, the art of conning people into doing what you want them to do, using either non-technical means or technical adjacent means. But, really comes down to being essentially a smooth talker, right? And there are tons of different techniques that social engineers use to gain access to information or usernames or passwords or whatever. This is just a very small subset to give you at least a little bit of an idea of how this works. There's shoulder surfing. And shoulder surfing is just kind of looking over somebody's shoulder as they type. And if you're good, you can watch a person's fingers as they're typing and track where they're typing. So if you can just kind of look over somebody's shoulder as they're putting in their username and password, you can now have that information. If you can watch as they're typing in their credit card number or their bank account number or whatever, you can watch their keys, watch what they're typing, and capture that information. Another common technique is dumpster diving. So contrary to popular belief, your trash is open to whoever wants to go through it. Unless they're trespassing to do it, there is no either Fourth Amendment protection to protect people from law enforcement, and there's no laws to stop really whoever wants to from going through your trash. So, at my house, as soon as I drag my trash bin up to the side of the street, anybody who wants to is legally able to go through that trash. If a company puts their trash in a public place, there is no law preventing anybody who wants to from searching through that trash to find whatever information they want. And it's really amazing what people will throw away. Businesses throw away internal documents and information that, might not, everything from really important stuff that nobody should read to stuff that doesn't seem important at the time, but a bad actor can kind of use that information to conglomerate and create a picture of what's going on in order to help them do either another social engineering attack or some other kind of hack. Even something like, so-and-so vice president is going to be on vacation for, the week of January 14th or whatever. A bad actor can use that to know they're not going to be in the office. And thus, if they call looking for that person, they can be like, he told me that I really needed to get this project done while he was gone, but I need this information from him in order to complete it. So could you please tell me, since he's gone, can you give me the information that he was supposed to give me? And this person saying, hey, that person's on vacation, might not realize that the person they're talking to on the phone is a bad actor trying to get access to information they're not supposed to have. And since the bad actor knew that person was going to be on vacation, they knew they'd be talking to somebody who wasn't that person. And thus can kind of manipulate them into getting that information they want. Now, pretexting is another kind of very broad subject, but it involves creating a situation in which the hacker is able to get what they want based on the situation that they themselves created. Now, to give you an example, Kevin Mitnick once, he went into a business, a large multinational business, and went up to the kind of, the person working the front counter and said, hey, I'm from IT for your business. There's been this certain problem with the computer system going on. Have you experienced this? And the victim said, no, I haven't experienced that. And the IT in Kevin Mitnick said, okay, well, if you do, here's my card. Call me. I'm the one in charge of fixing this problem. Person at the front desk said, okay, no problem. Kevin Mitnick goes home and then creates that situation on that person's computer he had warned them about, right? You know, this service stopped working or something. So he made that service stop working. And then that person called Kevin Mitnick using that card he had left, said, hey, that problem you said was going to happen happened to me. Can you please fix it? Kevin Mitnick said, yeah, sure, no problem. I can fix it. What's your user account? What's your password? And gathered all this information. That is what he really wanted in the first place. And then once he had that information that this person was comfortable giving, because it was her own company's IT person, right? Not really. But they were comfortable giving all this information because they thought it was the right thing to do because of this situation that Kevin Mitnick had created. And then all he had to do was stop creating that situation. It fixed the problem. And now Mitnick had all the information he was after. The person didn't even realize they had been a victim. And Kevin was able to go on and do more cybercrime-y stuff, right? And then for physical security, you know, often buildings have physical security access restrictions to prevent people from entering because, you know, there's all kinds of bad things that bad people could get it up to if they were inside your building. So they have, say, card readers at the front door that you have to swipe in order to enter the building, right? Well, tailgating refers to just kind of dressing like somebody from that building would dress, waiting for somebody to walk in, swipe their card to open the door, and then just following right behind them as the door is open. Because we've been trained socially to kind of hold the door open for people, right? So why wouldn't you hold the door open for this person that was coming in right behind you? They look like they should belong. They're dressed in a suit. They're carrying a briefcase or whatever. So of course they're allowed to be in this building. I'll hold the door open for them and allow them in, unknowingly allowing a bad actor to enter the building. You can also do things like tailgating from the front, which, so the bad person will say, carry a big heavy looking box and then go up to the door first and then kind of, awkwardly try to reach for their key card that doesn't really exist, but other people don't know this, which will inspire somebody to be like, oh, that person's trying to get in and they're having trouble. So again, I've been socialized to help this person. So I'll take my key card out, swipe it for them, open the door, allow them to walk in because they're having trouble reaching their key card, right? So there's lots of different ways you can kind of do this tailgating process. In a more technical sense, hackers and bad actors are always on the lookout for vulnerabilities. And a vulnerability is just, it can be an oversight or a bug in computer code that allow people to do something they're not supposed to be able to do. So if I create a website with a username and password feature and I accidentally don't fix some security hole, some bug in my programming, hackers are always on the lookout for that vulnerability, because once they find a vulnerability, they can create an exploit. They can create a program or a technique or a process by which they can exploit that vulnerability in order to get them something that they're not supposed to have, whether it's access to information or credit card numbers or passwords or whatever. They're able to create one of these exploits to do that bad thing based on that bug or that security hole or that kind of opening that the person who made that software forgot to close. Now, the programs that are created to do these nefarious deeds, or programs or media, video games or movies or whatever that have been illegally acquired, those were often referred to as wares, W-A-R-E-Z, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. That's kind of fallen out of favor these days. But if you ever see that word kind of in a cybercrime context, that's kind of what it means, is a illegally obtained program or a program to exploit some kind of vulnerability. One of the most common ways of gaining access to accounts that you shouldn't have access to is called phishing. And that's phishing with a PH. Just like phone freaks is freak with a PH instead of an F. this is phishing, but with a PH instead of an F. And I'm sure we've all seen these, because I'm assuming everybody in the 21st century has received one of these. But phishing, usually over email, although sometimes over a program's chat system, or over any other kind of messaging service, texting, WhatsApp, any kind of messaging system. But again, usually email. You'll get a message that says, hey, I'm from such and such corporation. There's a problem with your account. Please click here to enter your username and password, or your account will be shut down, right? Or some other kind of, bad thing is going to happen unless you click this link, unless you reply with your username and password, unless you do this or do that, right? And, the most people in the 21st century have figured out that these are bad actors. Most modern email programs will automatically kind of deny and delete these emails when they come out. But because it's so easy to send mass emails to people, even if you have a very low kind of hit rate, i.e. I send 1 million emails, even if I only get 5% of the people to click on that link or reply with their username and password or whatever, that's still a huge number of victims. So phishing is where you just kind of, pretend to be somebody you're not, try to scare people into thinking something bad is going to happen if they don't do what you want. Whether that's clicking a link or putting in their username and password or doing whatever. And then just hoping that a certain percentage of them will kind of fall for that and send you their usernames and passwords or whatever. Whaling is a similar thing, but instead of kind of casting a wide net looking for lots and lots of victims, you're targeting one person. You're targeting, or a very small group of people, right? And you are tailoring your message to look less and less and less like a phishing message, right? So if I'm targeting a specific CEO of a company, I can spoof my email address so it looks like it's coming from somebody I know they know, and I can put personalized information in there like, hey, I'm glad you're back from vacation. I hope you had fun in Costa Rica, because I know they just got back, So I can put in all the personalized things that make it look less like a spammer, less like a bad actor, and more like it's actually coming from this person that my target knows. And say, hey, by the way, can you click this link? Can you send me this information? Can you, do this thing that will then allow me to hijack your accounts, right? And this is essentially what happened to, in 2016, during the United States presidential election. The campaign manager for Hillary Clinton's campaign fell for one of these whaling emails, and that is how bad actors got access to their entire email account, and were able to find some not criminal, not even really bad emails, but they were able to turn those into something that at least kind of sort of looked nefarious, and that almost definitely had a huge impact on the 2016 United States presidential election. Now, when you're talking about different types of hackers, there's lots of different ways to divide up types of hackers, to say, okay, this type of hacker is over here and this type of hacker is over here. One of them is to look at internal versus external. And if you're with some kind of organization or a company or a government, internal means somebody working for that organization or somebody within that organization, right? So if I work for a company, an internal hacker would be somebody who is employed by my company, or at least, recently employed, right? Whereas external would be anybody else, somewhere, from another country or another area that's never worked for my company, never been a part of my organization. Now, the vast majority of all cyber crimes against organizations are committed via internal actors. But security is usually hyper focused on the external actor, because that's kind of the boogeyman. That's kind of the thing that we're taught to fear in lots of different aspects of our lives. But crime is always from the stranger, right? Whereas the vast majority of the time, crimes happen to us, whether it's cybercrime or traditional crime. The people victimizing us aren't strangers. They're the people we know, our friends, our family, our acquaintances, our coworkers, right? Same thing with cybercrime. Internal actors are a far larger actual threat, but far too often security is focused on the external threat instead of the internal threat, okay? You can also talk about modern hackers in terms of nation state or non-nation state. So, just like with terrorism and warfare, it's different whether it's a country and a country's government doing something versus just some rogue group, right? So most governments around the world have hackers working for them, whether it's through the military or through the civilian law enforcement or whether through some other agency. Most nation states have computer criminals essentially working for the government and creating viruses and finding vulnerabilities and exploiting those vulnerabilities, all on behalf of some government's goal, some government purpose, not their own kind of criminal interests, right? So one of the difficulties with cybercrime, and we'll talk more about this on our section on cyber war and cyber terror, is that it's really difficult to determine sometimes whether it's a country doing this or just some rogue criminal from within that country. And that's even if you can track it down to a country in the first place. But let's say tomorrow the United States has a major hacking victimization and all the New York Stock Exchange gets hacked. And we get really, really, really lucky and we're able to trace that hack to a computer in China. How are we supposed to know whether that hacker was working for the Chinese government or if it was just some Chinese citizen wanting to hack the United States? That can be one of the most difficult things to determine when it comes to nation state versus non-nation state actors, and whether we should hold the Chinese government accountable for that attack or whether it was really not their fault. It was just some citizen of theirs that became a computer criminal. One of the great kind of examples of nation state versus non-nation state attribution is the Stuxnet virus. And again, we're going to talk more about this later on, but essentially somebody created this really huge, really complicated computer virus called the Stuxnet virus, which was primarily designed and directly targeted at an Iranian nuclear facility to attack and break the centrifuges that Iran was using to enrich uranium for nuclear weapons. Now, as far as I know, it's never been officially kind of attributed to any particular person or group, either nation state or non-nation state, but it's kind of a semi-open secret, and people kind of presume with very good reason that Stuxnet virus wasn't created by some random hacker. It was created by the government or governments of Israel and or the United States, probably both working together. But it's, because there's no official confirmation that the United States and Israel created that virus, Iran can't, or it's at least a little bit more difficult for Iran to hold that against them, right? So nation state versus non-nation state actors is a very big issue, very big problem. And again, we'll talk more about that in a later section. Another way to classify hackers is black hat, white hat, or gray hat. And this comes out of old Western movies. And if you ever watch old Western movies like from the 1950s and 60s, you'll notice that the good guys always wear a white cowboy hat and the bad guys always wear a black cowboy hat, right? So in computer crime, we've kind of adopted that nomenclature. So a black hat hacker is a bad guy, somebody who hacks for their own profit and their own gain. Whereas a white hat hacker is somebody who works within the system and hacks legally in order to do things like penetration testing, or working for the government to try to secure government servers, or working for a company to try to secure that company's servers. And they know all the same techniques as the black hat hackers. They know all the same processes and have the same kind of motivations, and all those different things are the same. But the white hats don't break the law, and they're trying to improve things, whereas the black hat hackers do break the law, and they're trying to kind of enrich themselves. And then gray hat is kind of the middle ground. Gray hat is kind of sometimes you're doing good, sometimes you're doing bad. You're doing the right things for the wrong reasons, or the wrong things for the right reasons. That kind of, it's kind of middle ground between black hat and white hat. Now, I wrote my PhD dissertation all about media stereotypes of hackers when it comes to kind of basic demographics. So I got a sample of prisoners from around the country in state and federal prison. And I wanted to see if the people in prison for computer crime were fundamentally different demographically than the people in prison for essentially everything else, right? So I looked at these 4 variables: age, race, education, and gender. Because the media stereotype of cyber criminals is that they're young, they're white, they're well-educated, and they're male, right? I mean, that's when you think of hacker in movies or TV shows, that's really the stereotype. So I wanted to see if that was true. And again, not comparing this to the country at large, but comparing this to other prisoners, people who are in prison for murder and rape and robbery and burglary and all those things, right? And I had some really surprising findings. So first off, the first 3, absolutely spot on. People in prison for computer crime were indeed younger, they were indeed more likely to be white, and they were indeed more well-educated than the rest of the prison population. The really surprising thing was they were much more likely to be female than the rest of the prison population. So keep in mind, crime is fairly overwhelmingly male-dominated activity. So I'm not saying that most hackers are female. I'm saying that hackers are more likely to be female compared to other crimes, right? And there's lots of stuff I could talk about here, from feminist theories of crime to computer crime history and all those things. But just keep that in mind, that it's not nearly as male dominated as crime in general is. Now, one of the things hackers have done is get together in groups. Not necessarily to commit crimes together, although that absolutely happens, but just to kind of talk to one another and mentor one another and discuss different things that they've done and show off different techniques and different vulnerabilities that they've found and different, processes and all these things. So there's lots of different hacking groups out there. The most famous one is probably Anonymous, which isn't technically a hacking group, but we can get into the details of that later. But there are also other just different groups of people, sometimes that get together in real life. Sometimes these are groups that have never met in real life and they have no idea what country the other members of the group live in, because they're maintaining that anonymity. And then kind of one of the really shocking things to a lot of people just learning about this subject is that computer criminals have like full-blown conferences, right? There are multiple different conferences that you can go to that attract hundreds or thousands of hackers from around the world to get together and talk about all these different things that they're doing and different, future areas of concern. And here's this new technology and security this and vulnerabilities and all those things. So one of the most famous is called DEF CON. There's also one called Black Hat. And these are held, usually yearly, sometimes in Las Vegas or other major cities. And it's just where computer criminals get together and kind of show off and talk and network just like they would at, just like I do at criminal justice conferences. Now, what really brings hackers together as a community? And there's kind of three different areas that hackers kind of can bond with, that they all kind of seem to have in common. And of course, not every single one. But in general, the group tends to have these three factors in common, and that kind of brings them together as a community, right? The first is technology. They love technology. Computers, digital devices, tablets, cell phones. How does this work? How can we use this in a different way? How can we kind of figure out what's going on under the hood, so to speak, right? They love looking and learning and investigating and trying new things and investigating, everything from self-driving cars to internet connected refrigerators to, they're fascinated by all this technology. Second thing is knowledge. They feel usually that knowledge and the ability to know and do things is the ultimate measure of how good of a hacker you are, how important you are in the community, right? So it's all about, what do you know? What do you not know? What can you demonstrate? What can you do that other people can't? If somebody says, oh, I've created this unhackable system, who's going to be the first to hack it? Who's going to figure out where the holes are? Who's going to be smart enough and knowledgeable enough and know enough to be able to get into that system, to break into that device, to do that thing that the person who makes it says is impossible to do? Because it's going to happen, right? There's no such thing as an unhackable system. It's just about who's going to be good enough to figure it out first, right? And then the third factor is secrecy. They for people who love information and technology and knowing everything about everything, they're also very secretive about themselves and who they are and where they're from and what they do in their off time. And so one of the kind of ubiquitous features of cyber criminals is their use of a handle or a pseudonym, right? We talked in a previous subsection about Captain Crunch, right? He didn't want to use his real name. He went by the pseudonym Captain Crunch to provide at least a little bit of a measure of secrecy and privacy, so that people don't know who that person is, right? So now every hacker has one of these, usually, almost always, has one of these handles, some online pseudonym that they're known by, that kind of keeps that hacking life separate from their real life. If they have a regular 9-to-5 job and family and friends, they want to keep their hacking career very separate from that. And use of that pseudonym, that handle, helps with that. And thanks to, websites and such that force you to create a username, this has become a relatively general thing that most people have, right? I have a certain online handle that I go by across multiple different websites. And, even as a non-hacker, I have one of these pseudonyms that I'm known by among these different communities, that is not necessarily really linked to my real life, Kevin persona. It's a separate, it's a dividing line between real life and my online life, if that makes sense. Now, that's the end of section 5. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next section.